Oh boy, Florida Governor Ron DeSantis thinks pot is a menace to society, even though his biggest backer is working to legalize it. Oh boy. Ron DeSantis is no fan of weed, and the Florida governor recently called recreational pot a real problem, lamented marijuana's stench, and grimly warned that drugs are killing this country, he says. There's just one hitch. The person effectively running DeSantis' presidential campaign is orchestrating a pro-pot push in Florida. That's right, you guys. Axiom Strategies and Vanguard Field Strategies, firms helmed by prominent Republican strategist Jeff Rowe, have been paid nearly $29 million by an organization pushing a 2024 ballot initiative that would legalize adult use cannabis in the state of Florida. A DeSantis-aligned attorney general is fighting their work, and the governor himself has said he broadly opposes legalization. But as Axiom and Vanguard try to circumvent DeSantis' opposition to weed in Florida, they're also trying to get him elected president, in part on an anti-weed platform, you guys. Axiom and Vanguard have been paid over $25 million by the pro-DeSantis Never Back Down through the end of June, making them the super PAC's highest paid vendor. Never Back Down oversees much of the DeSantis campaign, standing up, get out the vote programs, hosting events he appears at, and even providing transportation for the governor. That the firms have taken on conflicting clients illustrates the peril that comes with how DeSantis has designed his political apparatus, something that has increasingly become a topic of discussion within the governor's orbit. Because the campaign and super PAC are legally prohibited from coordinating, DeSantis has had to bet his political future on an outfit whose approach and interests don't always align with his own. There have been growing tensions and finger-pointing in recent weeks between the DeSantis campaign and Never Back Down, as the two organizations have grappled with how to improve the governor's standing in a primary where his prospects have diminished. And oh, yes, they have. DeSantis allies say he was infuriated by the super PAC's decision to post on Axiom's website a memo offering instructions on the strategy he should adopt in last month's debate. They argue the memo made it harder for DeSantis and boxing him in and setting expectations for his performance. Well, I'll tell you what, that's your job, is to perform it when you're the governor, and when you're running for president, that's part of the job. But nonetheless, a few weeks later, a recording emerged from a Never Back Down donor briefing in which Rowe said that DeSantis had a 60-day window beginning on Labor Day in order to defeat former President Donald Trump, and that he had to move ahead of his other GOP rivals. Now, the declaration, some Republicans said, put an arbitrary time frame on when DeSantis would need to surpass Trump, who is leading the governor by wide margins in polling, and I would say in double digits. The conflict between DeSantis and his super PAC team over pot use threatens to complicate the governor's efforts to cast himself as tough on even recreational drugs. If successful, the initiative could also prove to be an embarrassment for the governor, putting him out of step with his own constituents on a hot-button crucial issue. During a recent event hosted by Never Back Down, the governor expressed concern that pot had grown increasingly potent in recent years and that it could be laced with fentanyl, potentially endangering children who use it. In a quote, he says, "I think it's a real problem, and I think it's a lot different than the stuff people were using 30 or 40 years ago." Well, that's for sure, because there's no seeds and stems in it, Governor DeSantis, but nonetheless. And the Governor DeSantis also says, "And I think when kids get on that, I think it causes a lot of problems." Well, yes, of course it causes problems for kids, because they shouldn't be using cannabis unless it's prescribed to them by a doctor. But nonetheless, the recreational marijuana initiative, which has been funded largely by marijuana giant Trulieve, is viewed by Florida Democrats as a potential vehicle for reviving their morbid status in the state. Party officials and volunteers have been working to gather signatures for it, but there is no guarantee that it will actually make the ballot. Florida Attorney General Ashley Moody, a DeSantis ally who has endorsed his White House campaign, has filed a brief with the conservative-leaning state Supreme Court urging for it to be struck down. And in a quote, They say, we are confident that the Florida Supreme Court will see that we followed the law and their guidance in drafting this initiative and reject the last-ditch efforts to prevent Florida voters from making this decision for themselves as the Constitution provides, said a Smart and Safe Florida spokesperson. Axiom is one of the Republican Party's largest consulting firms and has long taken a wide array of clients. The breadth of its portfolio, those familiar with the firm say, has occasionally resulted in Axiom concurrently working for clients who have ideological differences. The firm's work for Florida's pro-marijuana initiative began back in 2022, months before it signed on with Never Back Down this past March. And since last year, Axiom and Vanguard have emerged as the largest vendors for Smart and Safe Florida, the outfit that is spearheading the pot initiative, which would allow for adults 21 and over to be able to purchase cannabis for non-medical uses. The firms combined account for more than 70% of the total amount spent by the group. And in a quote, Axiom is a company with hundreds of employees where it's not uncommon to have different team members working on different projects, said Chris Pack, an Axiom spokesperson. Axiom signed with Safe and Smart Florida back in June of 2022 and Never Back Down in March of 2023. And these two entities are totally separate from one another, which is why nobody in the media has written about this since it was first reported on months ago. A spokesperson declined to comment, though they pointed to remarks the governor has made conveying his opposition to the legalization of adult use cannabis, and the pro-cannabis initiative has turned in a major political fight. Smart and Safe Florida has reported obtaining more than 960,000 signatures, more than the total it needs to qualify for the ballot. But Moody has moved to strike the initiative, arguing that it misleads voters and would financially benefit TrueLeaf, the cannabis company that is bankrolling the campaign. The pro-marijuana organization has aggressively pushed back, saying that the Attorney General's argument stains credulity, is what they say. While DeSantis has expressed openness to the use of medical marijuana, he has aggressively established himself as opposed to legalization for adult use purposes. And last year, the governor complained about the drug's pungent odor and said he wanted Floridians to be able to breathe freely. DeSantis has signed legislation tightening restrictions on advertising that would promote adult use cannabis use. And while campaigning earlier this year, the governor said he would not decriminalize marijuana if elected president, and that the drug hurts our workforce readiness and people's ability to prosper. Well, this just sounds like a whole bunch of reefer madness, but I want to hear what you guys have to say about good old Meatball Ron. And this is Jason Beck for the High at 9 News Hour. What do y'all think about this?
Ron's got to go to the right of Donald Trump. And this sounds like the first attempt to go to the right of Donald Trump and cater to the religious right.
Mm-hmm.
And the religious right just keeps beating that drum of, oh, the children is going to ruin society. You know, throwing people in jail doesn't do a great deal for society either. And he's going to pander to this base during the primaries, but he's never going to be, on the ticket as the primary candidate for president for the Republican Party, because people just don't fucking like him.
Hey, I agree with you on that, Dale. I don't think he has a chance of earning the Republican nomination at this point, with all of the missteps that the campaign has done, and all of his positions on cannabis and his positions on a few other issues, and the lack of popularity and enthusiasm that people are seeing around his camp.
Yeah. Well, it's the drumbeat of the religious right, and he's going to go out there and dance to it as long as he thinks it's going to get him somewhere in the primaries. But people are boxing themselves in for a general election. They're going to play this shit back in the general election, and what are you going to do? You're going to have to own what you said and did.
Yep, exactly. And
Jay, I would be careful predicting the Republican nominee in September of 23.
The Republican nominee is going to end up being President Donald Trump.
Well, that remains to be seen. What I think is equally interesting. What I think is equally interesting, though, here is that it sounds like Ron DeSantis is getting all of his cannabis information from maybe a 1983 or 84 Dare book. I'm not sure, like none of it was based in science. It was all like old stoner, like folklore and shit like that. Like, I don't know. Ron, look, tap in with us if you want some like really educated knowledge and lacing up on what this plant can do, what it can do for your state, what it can do for taxes, what it can do for your senior citizen population. Tap in with us. I personally think that if Ron listened to his strategy, his Axiom and his strategic partners over at the PAC and did what they're doing, I think he would be a more viable general election candidate for real. Like right now, Ron is like putting himself into this box that is going to make him like very unelectable, even on the Republican side. So I feel like, hey, look, listen to maybe the people who are that super PAC that's paying those big dollars. Maybe they're onto something there, Ron. Maybe you should listen to them. You might have a chance against some of your counterparts. It would be a small one.
Yeah,
might be a chance.
I think Ron has taken a lot of his talking points in regards to this from the Siegel family who lost a child, and they are similar in the space as the Adelson family, Sheldon Adelson's family, and they both lost kids to other drugs, but definitely blame cannabis as the gateway drug that allowed that to happen.
And listen, I get it. Like when parents go through these really tough times like that, my heart and prayers go out to any parent that loses a child to any kind of drug overdose. However, that has nothing to do with the cannabis plant. That would be like me saying like my brother got killed by a drunk driver and now I'm attacking like lemonade stores or something. Like there's no
attacking
correlation
liquor stores,
there.
right? Attacking liquor stores basically now.
Yeah. Like there's no correlation there. So listen, like again, my hearts go out to them, but those aren't the right people to get all your talking points from. Not saying that they don't deserve a seat at the table as a stakeholder in the war on drugs. Absolutely. Their voice should be heard. However, there should be other stakeholders to balance out those voices at the table of people who have been impacted by cannabis prohibition, people who benefit from cannabis, and not just some of like this like, oh, I heard it smells bad. I heard we can't breathe because of it. I heard like that's just nonsense. Come on.
I know. I find it ridiculous that he's throwing the fentanyl argument in a lot of his comments in regards to this, because it's just not reality.
Yeah, that's what I was just going to say. The fentanyl argument is played out because if anybody's lacing anything with fentanyl, why pick weed? You can literally lace anything with fentanyl. Why is weed being singled out as like this culprit?
I don't think
hurting people with fentanyl. I don't understand.
I don't think you can really like put fentanyl in weed in the sense of like how you would do it with other drugs, how you would mix it in. Like I just don't
exactly.
I just don't see how that even makes sense.
Does anyone have any idea how much it would cost to lace ace of weed with fentanyl? They would not still be able to sell it to you for $25 an eighth.
Well, first of all, Luke, they would only be selling pre-rolls if that was even the case in the first place, because you know what I mean? You're not going to go and buy some big old dusty bag of weed. Just saying.
Well, fentanyl's the hobgoblin everyone wants to turn to, and the number one entryway drug for everybody's alcohol. So just fucking stop it. You know, weed's way down the line, and it won't kill you. And your kids know about it because they're pinching your fucking bags right now. It's just nonsense.
Oh, that's right. Nonsense. They're pinching the bag. You're so right on that, Dale.